To the InStory show. I'm Devorah Spilman, your host, and today I am thrilled to welcome Cathy Brett. Hi, Cathy.
Hey, Devorah, nice to be here.
So glad you're here. So Cathy is one of our InStory experts, and we'll talk a little bit more later about what that means. And Cathy, in her professional life, is an innovation learning strategist in the tech industry. And I'm going to have her talk about what the heck that means. So Cathy, share with us a little bit about what is it that you do? How do you help people? What is this idea of innovation learning that you focus on?
Yeah, I appreciate that. And yes, it's often interesting because I get asked a lot from people, what do you do? And it's, I often say, like, I help people be creative at work. And they're like, well, what does that mean? And so what is this innovation? Because innovation has a lot of meanings to a lot of different people. And in the high tech industry, and I think we all experience this in life, is that things are accelerating at rates that we're not seeing. So if you're familiar with Moore's law, things duplicate and they increase at an exponential rate. And so that is skyrocketing. It's that whole curve that's so fast. And so for us in tech, as you can imagine, as technology becomes so much faster and so much different, and and I laugh when I think of my niece and my nephew who are just out of high school and going into college. They never knew life without a Google search or without a hand, a smartphone kind of thing. And it's like, wow, things are moving really, really fast. So how do we stay up with that? How do we be innovative? How can we accelerate that? And the only way that we can do that is to create space so that people can tap into new ways of thinking and new ways of working and bringing in diverse mind share, interacting and collaborating in ways they've never thought of, because collectively, what we say in the tech world is that collectively we can come up with a better idea than I can by myself. And so how do we tap into everybody's authentic self, which is a little bit of a buzzword also in the tech world, but we all bring our experience and our lives together. We can actually come up with solutions that are pretty amazing. And so my job, my role is to think of ways of doing that. And I do a lot of around design thinking. Oftentimes we call it design doing. Some of you guys might be familiar with that. And we talk about creative confidence and just getting people to go into spaces that there may not be a right answer. And it's going and just following. So the breadcrumbs, so to speak.
Well, does that lead into the topic that you brought up about ambiguity? Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
I was surprised when you said that word, because honestly, in my creative, spiritual storytelling world, I never use the word ambiguity. I can't even remember the last time until we had a conversation that I even used that word. I might say unclear, or anyway, but so I was kind of delighted by the word itself, and even being able to acknowledge, when do you bump into that and what do you do about it?
Yeah, and maybe I'll do a little bit of setting up what is ambiguity in terms of how I define it. And we talk about with our employees, I talk about even in myself. So when I have conversation with close friends, and I love the gray area. Like, I'm a person that does way better than really hard to find rules. And so for ambiguity, how I define it is around having more than one interpretation. So it'd be multiple interpretations. To me, that kind of translates into the world of infinite possibilities. And, we use a couple words interchangeably. Oftentimes we'll hear the word abstract. And so abstract versus ambiguity is a little bit around spatial thinking, going from concrete to conceptual. Those are abstract ideas or abstract thoughts. Again, ambiguity is there's more than one interpretation. Uncertainty also comes up, and uncertainty is usually a lack of knowledge. I don't know anything about it. I may not have confidence about my knowledge, where I actually, if I'm in the ambiguous world, I'm interpreting it. So I do have some kind of knowledge, whether that's based on experience, previous lives, whatever your beliefs are, that can really drive that. And then ambivalence, that sometimes gets thrown in there too. And ambivalence, I always reference it as, it's more than one feeling. So it's not necessarily an interpretation. They could be contradictory feelings and something, but it's more than one feeling. And again, so how do I, at work when we're trying to key this up, and is that we feel like if we can create ambiguity, or we don't have to create it, there's a lot of it, is how do we leverage methodology and again, people to co-create those solutions so that it can be innovative, and the multiple interpretations that everyone brings to the table. And you even experience this with your friends. You go to certain people for their interpretation or their thoughts on something. But what it does is you really hold that space for anything, again, that infinite possibilities, and trying to move forward in this fast moving world.
What strikes me as interesting is whether ambiguity is quote unquote good or bad. Right?
Yeah, that's a great thought. I don't know if I should ask you how you feel, if it's good or bad, but I would definitely say, the more ambiguous, it's good, but it also can be overstimulating and, can be paralyzing at the same sense. So there's definitely various comfort levels with that ambiguity. And, ambiguity is in our daily life, especially right now, as we're going through all of this experience together globally, with the coronavirus. But your news headlines are ambiguous. You and I could read the same headline and we would have different interpretations. Comedians, they really dive on ambiguity because you're sitting at a table with a friend, they're laughing and you may not get that joke. So it's, again, your interpretation. So I don't know that ambiguity in and of itself is good or bad, but I think it's how you approach it.
Right. That's what I was thinking, is that like I noticed that you, in your work environment, in order to actually have real creativity, if you don't create some kind of ambiguity or openness, there isn't going to be creative thought, because some people want to close down all questioning, right? And have only right answers. It's one of my, and I came up not through the corporate world, but through the education realm. And there is this sense in schools that you never want to create that. You want to create only right and wrong. So I think so that's why I find it interesting, because in order to have something become creative, there has to be some, like you said, that space.
Right.
So that's where I think it's positive, but I think you need a guide through there.
Yeah, you do need a guide. And on a personal level with ambiguity, it's like a lot of times we want to control the outcome, right? And it's that temptation, and to be able to find comfort in sitting in your own personal ambiguity. And, we talk about being mindful or being present, or if you're feeling like I need to tap into my creativity, the only way you can lean into that and really kind of explore that future is to have that ambiguity. So you have to have that invitation of bringing it in. One of the things that I teach in the work world, and also working towards, doing this, and some professors at Stanford have done this and they've done a great job, is we do a step what's called prototyping. You come up with a minimal viable product. That's something that's just kind of thrown together with pipe cleaners or drawings, and you get in front of somebody and say, is this what you were thinking of? And you do that with yourself, with that ambiguity. You make a decision. There isn't necessarily a right or wrong. There is an outcome. Something happens, you're testing it, and you might pivot or go another way, but you have to create that space to do that, so you can, breathe big, and also really, really think big. I think it also, on a personal level, my perspective of ambiguity also gives me the ability to build or create my future, versus that reacting or chasing or, maybe even hiding at times, and just kind of go with the flow a little bit.
Well, I think, what it makes me think of is also what I talk, because we use different words to describe these different states. So for me lately, it's been contracted versus expanded. Contracted feels like no ambiguity, no room. I need it to be right. I need to be okay. And that's like my old story. I need contracted in order to survive.
Mhm.
And being expanded is like, okay, maybe I don't know exactly what's going to happen or where it's going to be, but I have to feel more whole. I have to have more safeness maybe in my being, or maybe someone
Mhm.
holding that energetic space for me in order to
Yeah.
tolerate that, just because it's uncomfortable, I think, in
Mhm.
a way that many of us were told don't do. Like any kind of
Yeah.
ambiguity is going to be dangerous, so don't go there.
Yeah. And oftentimes, depending on your schooling system, you're incentivized to get the right answer.
Right.
So that's really going to kind of create that story in your head of really being locked down and I got to get to the right answer. I can't say, like, honestly, I have bad days and I have days where I want somebody to just tell me what to do. And ambiguity isn't maybe my friend. But in general, for me, it's where, my intuition comes in. I'm a big outdoors person. I live in Colorado, so it's like a big playground here, and so I go hiking a lot, backpacking, camping, just getting outside and getting in touch with nature. It really kind of feeds my soul or feeds my inner wilderness, and so I think of it as there's these things called cairns, spelled Cairns. They're stacks of rocks, or if you're from Canada, the Inukshuks, they're guides. And so I always think of that's how I kind of relate it to the physical world here. Is a bit of that is my intuition.
I love that you said that, because the whole thing is this, one of the themes of this series is how to trust your intuition.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that you said, often in ambiguity is when you hear your intuition.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because if you're completely set and fixed, you're not even asking.
Right, right. You're not even open to see those signs or those nudges. And then I think there's been people in my life that I've noticed too, like things seem really easy for them, or they just flow so light and easy. And having conversation with them, it just like kind of they go with their gut feeling. They don't override based on what the maybe the science or whatever the right wrong answer is, but they do what's true to them. And I think that's pretty interesting. And so I also think, I've studied a lot in permaculture as well, and we talk about these different zones. And there's in the fifth zone, it's that edge, and that's where the most growth is, and it's closest to wilderness as possible. And so I think that tapping into those various zones, you get to that fifth zone or that edge zone, and that's where your intuition is. And it's actually, the more you practice it, the more you feel safe with it. But it is that unconscious reasoning or guides or nudges, and we all see them. It happens all day long. Little things, little signs coming to us. Just not always able to see it.
So say a little bit more about these zones, and how can a person get into that fifth zone, that more edge? Like how do you help people get into that place? Because I think instinctively we still have the protect mechanisms as humans
Mm-hmm.
that would make it so you never want to go there.
Right, right. Yeah, so there's some things, back to what we do at work. When we start off doing a design thinking workshop, we'll partner people up, typically with people they don't even know, and we'll ask them to take a handy dandy post-it note. I have tons of these, and I'll tell you why too, but to draw your partner. And you can imagine adults, and as soon as I say draw, and there's a person that you have to draw, and if you're not super confident in that skill, you're immediately into that kind of like flight mode, like, get me out of here, I don't want to do this. But everybody survives, and it's amazing, what your partner typically says. Oh yeah, that kind of does look like me, whether it's got the glasses or the short hair, or whatever. There's some resemblance at some level, and that's just that, kind of a little bit of a shock to jump into that and to guide people to get out of that. So for me, personally, I have to remind myself, again, in permaculture, it's these 5 zones, and typically the house is at the middle, and then you spread out. And so as you get to the other zones, you see how they work with each other. So you have better confidence about it.
So, so take us through kind of the take us through how, like, how do we build resilience, and how do we grow in that way that allows you to move out of that realm where you feel kind of like you're stuck in this tight container and I'm never moving to the edge ever. And I mean, you can talk about like what it's like to be, I know you're an extreme athlete, and then I also know you had a time when you were kind of stuck at home also. So I want you to talk a little bit about who you are and how does being an extreme athlete, how do you help people who aren't that go to that edge? Because extreme athletes love to go to the edge. Like that's just their thing.
Yeah, it is.
But then you got slammed, and I want you to tell your story. Like I know because you're in InStory, so I've heard your story.
Yeah. So I am in InStory, and thanks for the encouragement there. Sorry for the little coughing attack there. So thanks for the mute there. Yeah, so I definitely was gifted as a kid to be pretty coordinated and pretty athletic, and so I got to play college volleyball and compete at a high level, and it just kind of carries into also the way I live. And I think partly growing up mostly in Colorado, we always explored lots of areas, and always that a bit of an internal drive to see how far or what I was capable physically doing, a lot of comfort in kind of the physical challenges out there. And you know, didn't always necessarily successful every time, but it was always an opportunity to get back up on my feet again. Now that said, when I turned 49, I found out I have hip dysplasia, and I never knew people could have that. And hip dysplasia is congenital. So I was actually born this way, having competed and done marathons and ridden my bikes hundreds and hundreds of miles, and tons of yoga and lots of different things to find out that basically hip dysplasia is that your femur head's like this and your hips cover it like this. And what happens with hip dysplasia, you have very shallow coverage, which causes a lot of hip pain. And so I was having that, and as a result, I went to the doctor finally with some encouragement, and found out I had this. And they asked, like, when can you do surgery? And by the way, you're going to be non-weight bearing for 5 months. And it's my right leg. I'm actually bilateral. I've just had surgery on my right leg. And it's your right leg, so you can't drive. And by the way, I live alone and I'm on crutches. I had to use a walker, and I spent all that time, you know, trying to figure out having to have people literally live in my home with me to take care of me, and not able to do what I'm typically doing. And so as I sat in my recliner with all the ice on and everything every day, looking out the window going, you know, hopefully this works, you know, and I had a few moments of that, I won't say. I don't think there was too many tears because I was super excited, one, to not have the pain anymore. And because I was limited in what I could do, it made me really humble in terms of how blessed I am to be able to do all of that. So the gift of my physicalness was really apparent. And then secondly, how great of a community I have to step in and take care of me and offer anything, whether it's literally changing the sheets on my bed to picking up a glass I broke on the floor because I couldn't bend over and do that. And fixing meals and all of those things, and you really realize how full your life is. And so once I realized all these gifts, it really empowered me to think, you know what, I am going to get back on that bike. I am going to run again. I am going to go climb big mountains, because that's who I am. And to really honor that, and anything less than that would be not being true to myself. And so, yeah, I had to relearn. I'm still going to PT even 6 years later, just making sure that my body is working the best that it can, and honoring that, learning how to walk again correctly, and learning as I get older too, because that's part of the process of learning, you know, exploring new limits I had never thought about prior to that.
So are you back on your bike or hiking, or what can you do now?
Yeah, I actually can do pretty much anything. Occasionally I have some pain and that makes me nervous. But with just some great, I guess, uh, getting out there feeds my soul, and being happy that I am doing it. It really has inspired me. I've climbed huge mountains in Peru. I took a couple years ago. We climbed up and camped up at about 15,000 feet, which I've never been that high before. And that was really awesome. I wasn't sure before going on the trip if I was going to be able to make it or not. And just, again, I keep looking forward and look at the opportunity, and no matter how slow it might take me, I want to get there. And so taking all the measures to make sure I can do that. And I, again, live in Colorado, so I ski and snowshoe and do all kinds of treks that are a little bit less probably exciting for some people maybe on this call of, just going for it. We kind of have a motto here of like, why not? And so, but I don't try to put myself in too much danger. I will say there is answers to let's not do that.
No, but what really strikes me is what's important now, as we're in this whole time in the world that's so unique as we're trying to keep people healthy during the coronavirus, and that many people have to stay home, which you had to do.
Yeah.
And I was saying to you, what did you learn from, that whole idea that your story might have wisdom in it for somebody right now, who's facing a whole different way of being right now, because many people, you had to stay home, right, and you had to sort out a whole other way of thinking and being and doing. And I wonder if you have some thoughts about what helped you that might help others.
Yeah, it is interesting. It's quite a comparison or an analogy, of me I wasn't able to walk, I can't drive, I can't leave my house, to what today for some people, I have a colleague in Italy that I was talking to this morning is on 3 weeks of quarantine. And my advice is, remove the noise and get to sit in what's important. And as I mentioned, as I'm sitting watching, I live really close to, we have a college here. I'm in Fort Collins, so Colorado State University. It was really close to my house. And so I'd see all these great fit people, and I live by the city park, and everybody's riding their bikes and walking by, and, really contemplate like, hey, what's really important to me, and get comfortable with why that's okay. And why do I want it? So that's one thing is, there's a lot of opportunity to reflect on things. I think the other thing is, regardless if your community is physically with you or not, and your community being, whether that's family members, extended family members, friends, people that you may have never met before. Like, I feel really connected to the InStory group. Never physically met any of them, but I feel like I could reach out and they would be there for me. And it's trusting that community. You become aware how important that is. And just as much as you may be feeling something, it's always great to reach out to someone else. And so one of the things I also found is there's this huge community of people about like us who've had this surgery and going through all the same things. And so made a lot of friendships. And then when I started feeling better, I started giving back advice for people who are just embarking on this journey themselves and had lots of questions. And that probably for me was like a blessing, because I didn't know, none of my immediate community has ever gone through this. And so there is those needs. And so you find those people and, give them lots of love, because they really do make a difference in your life.
I love that you said that you went through this surgery and you found other people who did, and and I think that's like this whole series of people are finding each other by listening to this together, and then people will go even deeper, join the whole year of InStory that you're in, and then it's like you're saying, I can go and receive support from these people who are going through that same thing. Like, maybe you'll talk a little bit about why you're in InStory, like what's pulling you forward, because I think what happens is you feel something pulling you forward, but nobody in your immediate community gets that. And so then you're not getting any support. So then you can't talk about it. Like your people didn't understand your hip dysplasia. So you couldn't really get the same support. But when you find other people who are working on something similar, there is this tremendous safety that you can bring a vulnerable stretch, you can bring a new story. You know, there's like a way you can show up that doesn't have to have everything perfect. You know, a lot of times in work you have to show up perfect, right? Like you said, oh, well, are we going to edit the interview? And I said, no. Like they'll probably hear you were coughing. Like, so what?
Yep.
Like it's partly this other is like that showing up authentically and showing up, you know, in a more present, honest place that maybe isn't safe in other realms. I don't know. I think it's a very important part of our being.
Well, and I think too, Devorah, one of the things is you realize we all have our stuff. You know, sometimes I joke like I want it to fit in the overhead carriage on the airplane, so then it becomes manageable of that size. But what you find out is it looks different for other people, but at the same core of what it is that we're working on or trying to heal or come to terms with or explore, there's so much similarity. It just looks different for all of us. And it's that commonality that you realize. And again, I think it's where, you know, in my work, when we talk about bringing that diverse mind share, because they bring everything with them. And so the people I've met, they bringing everything with them. But yet at the same time, we have some super commonalities, even though our lives look so different.
And I think sharing our stories is part of how we feel that commonality. And it's odd because in one sense, your story is what completely makes you unique because no one has your story. And at the same time, I hear your story and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. I remember when oh my gosh, I could tell my story. Like there's a resonance that makes us feel, I don't know, safer or more heard or more connected or more able. Like, oh, if she could get up from that, I can get up from my thing.
I agree. And I also think too, sometimes you hear it in a slightly different way and it all of a sudden gives you some kind of confidence or the Oprah aha moment, right? Like, oh, that's what that is. Those are, you know, whether there's signals from the universe that you've been getting and haven't been paying attention to. It's just sometimes you need it to hear it in a different way, in a different story than your own.
Right. I think that's true. And that's why it's like I'm always telling people to share their story. When I said, you know, you could probably use your story of recovering from hip dysplasia to help people now with quarantine. You went, oh, I never thought of that. We just don't think our stories are going to necessarily be valuable to the next person. And it takes just a little turning to see the wisdom you got, not just telling the event, but what did you learn from that? Like, how did you get through it? You know, so that, which kind of leads back to this whole concept of ambiguity. Like, it's not this set hard and fast, there's one way to do a thing. So, you know, so talk a little bit about ambiguity, talk a little bit about your free gift and kind of the value of being able to dive a little bit into that ambiguity.
Yeah, I think diving into it, and if I use my story about my hip dysplasia, you know, I asked the doctor, you know, like, okay, what does it look like on the out when I come out of this? And it actually was 2 surgeries, so I got to go twice. And so, you know, there's no guarantees, right? You're going to be better than you are today. And so diving into that ambiguity for me is really tapping into, you know, again, either if you have some rituals, some habits and so forth, is to build some trust for myself and some confidence in myself of, hey, I've made this decision, I'm going this way. I don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. I'm going to make more decisions tomorrow and I'm going to just keep moving and, you know, make small progress forward for that. And, you know, sometimes life, whether you intentionally want to be in it or not, you're going to be pushed into it. And I think the more that you practice it, the more confident you are going to be when you're dealing with it. And, you know, I feel like every hour our world is changing. And so there's a lot of ambiguity right now. And so my gift that I put together is actually something I do with, one thing is I do with work. And that is a lot when we have change management. And so if you think about ambiguity, you're interpreting and there's going to be change. And so it's taking the perspective of your future self. So writing a letter or a postcard in this case to yourself now from your future self. And it's a pretty simple exercise, but what it does is it really pulls up very quickly what is important to you, or what you're fearful of or concerned about. So important can be all kinds of things. It also could see a little bit of a path and tap into that intuition to show you, like, this is the direction. You know, your future self is saying, hey, take this direction. It can give insights. It could give gratitude where you may not be feeling gratitude. It could give you, you know, just specific advice around the future state. So I have one on there, a blank one, and then I have a one that I wrote as an example for you to look at, and kind of giving myself some advice to make some decisions and you know, dare to take some of the stuff that I do on a day job. And as I try to navigate some of the ambiguity in my career, is like, how do I do that maybe on my own and take some of that out in the world in a different way. And then I also feel that poems are a great example of ambiguity. And so you might have some favorite poems and you read them and you get a different interpretation. So I have a couple of poems on there as for you as well, to also exercise and reflect and see what interpretations you get. And it might change over time. And so it's really, my gift for you is just to really practice playing in a safe space. So kind of what I do in my work, trying to create that for you guys as well, to tap into your intuition, to look at something that's pretty ambiguous. But again, there's no right or wrong. And, you know, I know many of you on here probably have some type of activity or practice or prayer or chanting or journeying or, you know, just walking outside or traveling to new places that tap into that intuition to open that space up. And then I would encourage you, if you have those rituals, try practicing some of that. Have your future self write you a postcard.
I love that so much. And I really loved when you said, I want people to read a poem and ask themselves, what do you think about it? Because, you know, we don't think about things.
No, no, we get spoon fed a lot and we just go with it. And it's okay to ask why. You know, sometimes we do the 5 whys and it feels like an annoying child, but children do that. They're curious. They want to, you know, open that curiosity up.
Right. And maybe that's part of what we can do in this time when our lives are being very rearranged, is be more curious. And that, so just say a little bit more about, you know, like you've done this work that you do in a big corporation, but say a little bit more about how you're bringing it forward to a smaller company or to an individual.
Yeah. So I think with what I've done, I've been helping out actually with some school teachers and trying to think about how they create space for their students to also come together in a new and a different way, and collectively come up with ideas, and just think about, I also talk about the through point, like again, when I talk about those zones and permaculture, they're very much systematic closed loop systems, which one there's an output, it's an input into something else. So thinking about that in that aspect, for me, that kind of ranges in my visual head very quickly, of how those systems interact with each other. And so even in our lives and those decisions that we make, and talking to folks as well, just giving, whether that's career advice, or, you know, hey, I really like to brainstorm about something, or, you know, I'm embarking on this big challenge, how do we do that? And so one of the things also, again, the Post-it note, we use this often because when we scribe or you journal, sometimes it's very linear thinking, And so one of the ways, again, to try to get out of that space and create is if you put one thought per Post-it note, you actually can move those around. On a daily basis, if you guys can see in here, I have lots of Post-it notes of all different ideas that I have. I'm a pretty big idea person, love to brainstorm. So happy if everybody needs to brainstorm, let me know, I'll jump in there, and no lack of ideas, but again, it's kind of working in a new and different way versus me having this kind of list of things in an order that is more linear. So I try to push myself outside of that linear world.
Yeah, and so what I encourage everyone to do is get Cathys free gift, do the exercises, then jump into the Facebook group. We'll all be in there to support you. And especially if, I love that you're great at brainstorming. Anybody who needs a new idea, like if you feel stuck and the stuckness is that you can't think of what's next, or you just need to expand your thinking, like really reach out, and we'll be able to connect. Cathy will be, just like all the experts, will be in the InStory show Facebook group called the InStory World. Because I think it's an important area, and I think we can really support people to shift our thinking, especially in these times that are asking it of us. You know, and so Cathy, just as we wrap up, maybe share like a little bit of how InStory helped you and a little bit of inspiration for people as they are kind of looking to move forward.
Yeah, one thing that InStory, I actually heard the summit last time, and that's how I got connected, and was really impressed with what I heard, and it really just kind of spoke to me, and so I got connected with Devorah. And one of the things that Devorah has brought to me, and I don't know why, I always say I'm a visual person, and then I was like, oh, I never did this, but it's really around metaphors and telling stories about those metaphors. And so often doing a guided meditation with Devorah really helps me to go deeper, and adding on my style is to not get to a solution of that symbolism must mean this, but it's more of a message from my intuition. And so most recently I had we did a guided meditation as a group, and I had a covered bridge, but I couldn't see through the covered bridge, but I could see the area on the other side. There was water in between. The bridge went over water, but it was really a beautiful fall scene. And yet I couldn't see necessarily the path to get through there. And so some of the interpretation, possibly on my side, again, that ambiguous of like, what is that bridge about? You know, is maybe I'm already on the bridge as I'm kind of exploring and figuring out, you know, where I'm going, you know, in the future, and you know, how I can bring my wisdom and my services to be bigger and better and beyond me. And so I love the metaphors. That's been probably one of the most powerful things I've ever experienced.
And it's true. So I love that you said that, because it is unbelievable how powerful metaphor is, and it's used all the time, but most people don't have conscious access to it. They don't know how to use it. So, and that metaphor is so perfect for ambiguity and for giving people the kind of confidence to trust that that there's a bridge, even if you can't see everything about it, it's still there, and you can go through it, and you can come out okay on the other side. I love that. All right, we'll share a few just last words of inspiration as we wrap up.
Yeah, you know, I'm one of those people that can really sit into science, and I can navigate the business world, and I can navigate the spiritual world, and really just kind of take it all in. I'm a super curious person, and when I was working on this, I started looking at Albert Einstein, because I talk about him a lot, you know, his definition of insanity of doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results, right? And you do them the same way. And oddly enough, that I searched like, oh, what's Einstein say about intuition? And he actually had quite a bit to say, and I was super surprised. So I'm just gonna read a quote that he has around intuition. He says, there comes a leap, or excuse me, let me start. Intellect has a little to do on the road to discovery. There comes a leap in consciousness, call it intuition or what you will. The solution comes to you, and you don't know why or how. And I was like, yeah, Yep. And I was like, that is so spot on, Einstein. No wonder you're so smart and everybody quotes you, you know, because he kind of lives in that mathematical world, science world as well. So I just thought that was really great and really a great endorsement for trusting your intuition, because it doesn't matter how book smart you are, your intuition is really what's going to get you there. And you don't know how it happened.
Yeah. Yeah, and it leads us right back to trusting that ambiguous moment, because if I never allow that ambiguous moment, I will not be able to hear my intuition.
Right.
Right? Because if I'm just set, I'm not available for anything to come in.
Right.
So maybe the ambiguity is a little bit of the letting out some of the, you know, releasing some things. So
Releasing it. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, super cool. Well, Cathy, thank you so much. I just love the whole conversation, and I know the challenges that we can't go on forever. So
absolutely, it's going to be an interesting ride here for a while. So
yeah, and so people really reach out to us in the Facebook group, connect with Cathy, connect with each other. This is how we can gather right now, and it's amazing. I was already planned to go on this day before all this came out, so. Just trust that you're here for a reason. And as I always say in farewell, remember to go out in the world, share your story, live your purpose, and be a blessing. Thanks, Cathy.
Thanks, Devorah. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.